Here's a pressing question now that the American dream is at unprecedented risk of being snuffed out by Trump's make-believe superhero brain fart. Is virtual virtue a virtue or a vice? By virtual virtue, I mean identifying with the good guys in fiction, imagining that we're the heroes when playing video games, reading romance novels, watching movies, feeling holy in church, sharing and liking memes like we're crusaders for love, crying freedom like we're Braveheart, or saying flattering things about ourselves like I'm honest or I'll never understand bad people. Trumpies engage in a lot of virtual virtue, but then so do we liberal anti-Trumpies. I'm asking if virtual virtue is a good thing or a bad thing. And while we're at it, what about virtual vice? Is virtual vice a virtue or a vice? By virtual vice, I mean expressing our nastier impulses in fictional activities, identifying with the anti-heroes in movies, watching taboo porn, playing violent video games, listening to gangster rap and punk music in which we imagine overpowering others, dreaming of God sending heathens to hell. In general, letting our impulses run wild, but in fiction, virtually. Not in the streets, but in the privacy of our own homes. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? You've probably considered particular cases. Are religious fictions making people better or worse? Are porn and violent video games turning people into feral beasts? I'm asking in general, is virtual virtue a virtue or a vice? Is virtual vice a virtue or a vice? I'll give you my answer in a bit, but first a little more about what they are. Virtual virtue and virtual vice are expressions of something in all of us to some degree or another for very understandable reasons. You may not care for Freud, but he was onto something that by now is obvious. We don't always want to do what society demands. We've got our id impulses and our superego consciences. We'd like to lash our tongues, but we have to bite them and suck up to society. We dream of becoming heroes for doing whatever the hell we want, the way Trump does. But most of us can't, so we vent it in fiction instead. Virtual virtue is playing make-believe hero for the collective good. Virtual vice is fantasizing that we can get away with being beastly. But does venting in fiction lead to us venting it in public? Are virtual virtue and vice undermining society? Virtual virtue and virtual vice are what I call off-jerking, venting our impulses in the virtual realm. And they're two sides of the same coin, as we see in the Sado-narcissistic excesses of the Trumpies who pose as heroes for destroying the libs in the name of pious patriotism. It may seem odd that I'd call playing hero off-jerking, but think about it. Grandstanders like the Trumpies are cosplaying as patriotic heroes while being total jerks to around half of our citizens. It'd be one thing if they kept their fantasies to themselves, but they've taken it to the streets and right into the White House. And it's not just them. Though it might offend you to think of yourself this way, consider the possibility that you've got a sadomasochistic heroic jerk streak too. I think we all do to some degree, and that civilization has a better chance of surviving if we admit to this about ourselves and deal with the questions that follow from it. If you're willing to introspect, notice where you play out a little virtual virtue and virtual vice. If you're a gentle being who loves your family, friends, and everyone, do you like murder mysteries? Do you disapprove of gossip, but still get a little thrill talking about the clueless egomaniacs out there? If so, you might be engaging in virtual virtue and vice, just like me and everyone. You may be doing it in a different medium. You might like sharing virtue signaling memes about how you could never be like the Trumpies. They love feeling heroic for being disgusted by our hypocrisy while posting similar memes about us. Whereas I might like imagining that I'm a hero slaughtering villains in video games or violent movies. If you can set aside those differences and go generic with me, I'm asking whether off-jerking, sadomasochistically, to our fictional virtue and vice is a good thing or a bad thing. Dealing with an absolute narcissist, you might intuit that they're both vices. Narcissism was named after a guy who couldn't stop looking at himself. But have you noticed? No matter how hard you try, you can't get narcissists to look at themselves. They're living in a fantasy world, infatuated with a virtual virtue self-idealization. They're jerk-offs precisely because they've let their fictional fantasies go to their heads, imposing them on everyone in reality. They picture themselves as the supreme heroes whose duty it is to torture everyone who doesn't see them as heroes. Narcissism is Sado-narcissism by definition. Me up, you down. Their virtual virtue justifies their virtual vice. Sado-narcissists have split pretend personalities. They're the hero duty-bound to cut down anyone in their way. They're playing both God and God's most vicious defender, neither of which are reflections of the people they really are. They fantasize that they're fighting a holy war, which you'll notice is an oxymoron. Nothing more virtuous than holiness, nothing more nasty than war. No deed too dirty for a saint like them. So that's the danger with virtual virtue and virtual vice. It inspires and motivates people to become narcissistic jerk-offs in public. Still, before you decide that they're both vices, let's consider some other examples. Consider the part-time troll. You might not suspect him if you met him on the street. Decent family man, cheerful team player at work. At night, after the kids are in bed, he goes online, checks out from reality, and plays hero, viciously attacking anyone who disagrees with him. He gets off on gloating showboating, gets to bed by midnight, and the next day is a regular decent guy all over again. Consider the part-time liberal advocate of love and kindness. She's a mean girl at work. At home, her husband accommodates her to keep the peace, but online, over coffee, she's liking and sharing pretty memes about loving kindness as the answer to everything. Consider the fundamentalist churchgoer, normal during the week, but on Sunday is off in her Sunday best, not just in her best dress, but on her best behavior. She listens appreciatively to a sermon about how God loves saintly fundamentalists like her and sends non-believers to hell. Afterwards, she returns to her car and gets back to reality. Consider the young adult who plays violent video games in which he's the square-jawed soldier hero killing thousands of evil enemies. Consider the porn watcher who acts like God's gift to women who give their all to him because he's so superior to all the other men she's had. Besides that, both of these people are sweetie pies and totally respectful to women. Or consider the kid who finds all that fiction so encouraging that he goes out into the real world acting like an absolute asshole. That's all Sado-narcissistic virtual virtue and vice. Given human imaginations, any of us can do it. And from what I can tell, all of us do, especially these days, because, wow, have the vehicles for virtual virtue and vice gotten vivid. Porn, video games, social media, and the hyper-realistic TV fiction and so-called reality TV. America is getting obese on more than just processed foods. We're getting obese on highly processed, very convincing virtual virtue and vice as well. But even before all that fictional yet hyper-realistic media glitz, I could walk away from defeat and, in my own mind, declare myself the winner. I could walk into a party, see a more attractive, fit, competent, charismatic, wealthy rival, and instantly come up with a fictional reason why I'm superior to him. I could do that in bulk too, giving myself a confidence boost through prejudice, sweeping whole swaths of humanity under the bus just through the power of my imagination. I dare say we all can do that, and my question is whether those are good things to do or not. Is virtual virtue a virtue or a vice? Is virtual vice a virtue or a vice? Here's my guess. I think civilization wants opposite effects from virtual virtue and virtual vice. We want virtual virtue to motivate real virtue. We want people to identify with fictional good guy heroes in ways that inspires them to become real world heroes. We don't want people identifying with fictional heroes instead of being real world heroes. We don't want people to come out of the superhero movie and kick the homeless guy on the street because they already demonstrated their heroism by watching the movie. We want the opposite effect from virtual vice. It should be a substitute for real vice, a way to vent off our sadistic impulses. We don't want folks expressing their sadistic fantasies in real life. We want them using virtual vice to discharge their sadistic impulses, which again, you may deny having, though I think we all do, even those of us who choose love, hate, and hope the haters burn in hell. Notice the contradiction. Virtual virtue is a virtue when it motivates real-world virtue. Virtual vice is a virtue when it demotivates real vice. If you can stand to journey a little further down this hall of mirrors, the next question is this. That's what civilization hopes we do with fiction. But what do we as individuals want to do? Do I want virtual virtue to motivate me to be more virtuous in real life? Do I want virtual vice to demotivate real vice? Yes and no. I do in principle, and will shortly show how I put that principle into practice. Still, I have to admit that I'm up against my gut, which wants the opposite. I'm speaking for myself here, but I think it applies to all of us, you included. My gut wants the opposite of what civilization wants. My gut wants virtual virtue to demotivate my real virtue and virtual vice to motivate real vice. And here's why. My gut wants to maximize benefits and minimize costs. Real virtue is expensive. It's a hassle and a sacrifice. Morality is a burden. It limits what we can do. Real vice is cheap, at least in the short run. What better way to get what my gut wants than to pretend I'm a hero for getting away with hassling rivals? So yes, I recognize in me the impulses I see exercised to the hilt by Trumpies and other absolutists. The Trumpies treat Truth Social virtue signaling as all the proof they need that they're heroes in real life, and they exercise their fake heroism with real-world vice. Especially the young Trumpies who played video game soldier superheroes and then had to face the real world where jobs are hard to find. They grew up feeling like winners in the virtual world and ended up losers in the real world. No wonder so many have become incels disappointed by reality, joining the Trump heroic rage machine. Though especially the old grumpy Trumpies too. I'm convinced that they don't really care about abortion as much as they pretend. Condemning other people's abortions is a cheap, easy way to feel like heroic humanitarians without lifting a finger. And they kind of like how their heroic humanism sticks it to the liberal victims of abortion bans. But I get why people would be tempted to claim Sado-narcissistic virtue on the cheap and exercise their Sado-narcissistic vice in real life. It's a human thing. I own in myself this gut inclination towards Sado-narcissistic fake heroism on the cheap. I'm glad I see it in myself, or else I'm just countering my rival's Sado-narcissism with mine, which keeps us spinning our wheels up in the clouds above reality, which isn't impressed by our fictions. There's been a lot of that wheel spinning in human history, battles against other people's false idols in the service of our self-proclaimed true fictional idols. It's there at the start of the major religions. Abraham heroically smashing false idols in the name of God, his imaginable name-droppable ally. It's there in the iconoclast movement of the Byzantine Empire in the 700s. Islam, which doesn't allow graven images, was getting ahead of the Christians. So the emperor ordered all Christian iconography destroyed, and he pocketed all the golden jewels that were melted from it. It's there in Luther's condemnation of frequent communion as a substitute for virtue on his tyrannical terms. It's in France and Russia's attempts to overthrow religion only to become dictator worshippers, Robespierre and Stalin. It's there in MAGA's melodramatic anti-woke rhetoric, torturing any wokeness but their own. Same old story, same old bullshit. Our imaginations do tend to go to our heads, but I don't see a way to lobotomize our imaginations. In a way, I'm asking for compassion for all humans. We've all got these imaginations to deal with, and they will tend to get sado-narcissistic. A fictional buzz is more thrilling if you pretend it's realer than reality. I know the arguments for Zen acceptance and the pursuit of egoless purity. Back when I was an elected elder at the world's largest hippie commune, I wrote a song that's the most embarrassing thing I could share with you. It had a truly cringe-worthy line, so bad even my fellow hippies recognize its awfulness. Here goes. We have got to up the ante. We have got to try now, can't we? We have got to drop all our egos and deluding passions. I'm sorry. Been there, done with that. Now I'm an advocate of off-jerking in virtual virtue and virtual vice, but carefully, remembering why I'm doing it. I do it like normal, decent folk do when they watch TV. I feel like a hero when I'm lost in the fiction. I feel like the villains are my villains, and I'm happy to see them die lonely, miserable, fictional deaths while the music swells. And then I turn off the TV and get back to reality. I've been to a Trump rally. I've been to a death metal concert. I've been to a fundamentalist church service. I've enjoyed many popular experiences where folks indulge in what I call wee glee, the fictional feeling like we're the heroes laughing at the fools who aren't us. To me, they're all virtual virtue and virtual vice. And what determines whether they're virtuous for us or vice for us is all in whether we remember their fictions, their egotainment we humans depend on just to keep our mojo working. If you can remember that, when it's over, you can get back to reality without it going to your head. Humans aren't great at distinguishing fiction from reality, and in our guts, we don't want to be good at it. But we can get better at it. Speaking of which, if you're dealing with someone who is playing hero at your expense and you're losing your patience and mind, contact me for a free half-hour consulting session. Dealing with narcissists who can't keep it in fiction is my specialty. Thanks.